More than 2,000 of his troops killed in Iraq, but America's commander-in-chief hasn't been to a single funeral. Just after dawn, a plane arrives at an American military base in Germany with the latest casualties from Iraq. The American public rarely see images like this. The government has suppressed the true cost of the war. But the numbers are now so high that Americans have started asking, is it worth it?
Mark, I'm the chaplain. You're here at the hospital. We're going to take good care of you. We're praying for you.
At Landstuhl Hospital, the critical cases come off first, typically with brain damage and limbs blown off.
Julius, I'm the chaplain. You're here at the hospital. We're going to take good care of you. We're praying for you. Tyrell, I'm the chaplain. We're going to take good care of you here. We're praying for you.
Back in Iraq, the troops are involved in a much publicized new offensive, but this is the unseen side of such operations.
James, I'm the chaplain. We're going to take good care of you here.
Thanks, sir.
We're praying for you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Ryan, I'm the chaplain. We're going to take good care of you here. We're praying for you.
Thanks.
Justin, I'm the chaplain.
Hey, sir.
We're going to take good care of you here. We're praying for you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Jared, I'm the chaplain. We're going to take good care of you here.
A little block here. I'm injecting some Marcaine. Okay. The metal is back here, right back here. I took that out. I don't see any more metal. Let's get the focus over there.
We've been investigating how the American government has tried to hide the numbers and ban the pictures that show the reality of war. But casualty levels are now so high, they can't be disguised any longer. Most of these injuries are caused by shrapnel from roadside bombs. The wounds are dirty and ragged. The immediate risk is infection. In America, there's been very little coverage of this kind of aftermath of battle.
Okay, I'll take the fluffs. Can we have the tourniquet down, please? Yes.
The second case into theatre is an arm wound, again caused by a bomb blast. There's nothing very delicate about wartime operations. This is a surgical scrubbing brush.
It can be on a paper, because I know sometimes that Zero-Proline doesn't come on the
Nearly 16,000 American troops have been injured in battle since they invaded Iraq 2.5 years ago. 90% of the casualties happened after Americans were told it was all over. The image presented to the nation was of a victorious commander-in-chief.
My fellow Americans, major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
Is pinned down in the war. They outnumber and outgun the enemy, but they're still taking terrible losses.
These people are heroes. 18, 19, 20-year-old people whose lives are forever altered. ask them to do this for us. And that is hard. That is something that makes you lose sleep at night when you let yourself think about it.
Medical staff at Landstuhl always watch the news from Iraq to see who'll come through their door the next morning. A second influx of wounded, that's 22 today, and the whole process swings into action again.
Got it.
Prepare to lower. Lower.
Ryan, I'm the chaplain. We're going to take good care of you here. We're praying for you.
Ryan Bushter has arm, face and leg wounds from a grenade. His first priority is to call his girlfriend.
Yeah, I've never been in this much pain in my life. I have huge shrapnel wounds in my leg that they had to cut my leg open to let some of the blood out. And I have a little piece of shrapnel fly up my nose. It cut the inside of my nose, so I have two big galls, like little patches up there. And on my right hand, it's cut all the way down to the tendons. So you can see like the white shit when you move my fingers.
Probably sounds callous, but the patients blend together. It is a blur. There are very few whose names I even remember, which for me, that makes me sick at heart. Because, because when you train as a physician, one of the things that gets really indoctrinated into you is that this is not the gallbladder in room 3. This is Mrs. Jones. She's a person with a life and a family. And when you're not taking care of 17 people with very much the same injuries, you can think of them as individuals with lives and families. But when you're getting barraged with numbers of patients, the injuries begin to seem very much the same.
The world's best equipped army is still vulnerable in this kind of urban warfare. Their helmets don't stop the shock waves from bombs pulverizing the brain. And body armor still leaves arms and legs exposed. Better medical care means more soldiers are surviving, but with catastrophic injuries. Long-term rehabilitation starts at hospitals like this one in Minneapolis, run by the Veterans Administration. Over the summer, the VA needed an extra $1.5 billion to treat the unexpected number of Iraq casualties. Like Melissa Stockwell, she was the first female soldier to lose a limb in Iraq.
I'd been over there for about 5 weeks, and we were going from where I was stationed in northern Baghdad to the Green Zone, which is in central Baghdad. And about 10 minutes into the drive, we went under an underpass, and an IED, a roadside bomb, went off. And our vehicle swerved, and we hit a guardrail, and then we crashed into a woman's house. And between the blast of the roadside bomb and the guardrail, it took off my leg from the knee down. Basically, I had half of my bottom part of my leg left. And then I was losing a lot of blood, so in order to save my life, basically they had to amputate at the knee. I think it was huge when it actually did happen, because you never expect it to be you.
You know, Melissa, as we were working back over there, I noticed your gait was a little bit strange. Let me have a quick look at it, okay? Just hold on a second there.
Al Pike is one of America's top experts on artificial limbs.
Right.
Let's have a look at that.
Okay. Should we try to raise it a little bit?
A little bit short?
I think it might be.
Okay.
His enthusiasm almost blurs the fact that there are several hundred new amputees from this war.
I think the Iraq conflict is bringing about more research. I think we're going to see something new in the way of new innovative ideas and socket designs and suspension systems. And I think from this it's going to flow into the civilian market. And I think the whole concept of prosthetics is going to take a new step forward.
I'd heard that
they were actually sending people back into the battlefield with prosthetic limbs.
Yes, they have sent some people back into the field because we do have state-of-the-art prostheses today. They can be made strong and sturdy, and a person can get back in activity.
That's extraordinary. I heard some statistic from someone in Washington saying at some stage he hoped that 40% of amputees, military amputees, would be able to go back into the battlefield. Is that credible?
It should be possible, if not, stay in the military. There's no reason for an inconvenience like an amputation below the knee to prevent a person from completing a military career.
Inconvenience?
Well, I like to look at amputation as the first step in rehabilitation. It's a positive thing that happens to some people. It's not a negative thing.
It's sweaty, it's hard to put on. All right.
Melissa's army career is over. She's now studying to become a prosthetics technician like Al.
Everyone has their bad days, and you wonder why me, like what's my life going to be like? Can I run again? Can I wear heels again? I mean, all the questions that one would ask.
While Melissa is fairly upbeat about the future, life is much less certain for those with a brain injury.
Nursing assistants to 105, nursing assistants to 105, please.
In April, Bob Briggs was hit in the head by shrapnel from a rocket fired into his camp at Ramadi. It's too soon to know what the permanent damage is, but he probably won't ever recover fully.
This is a CT scan of Sergeant Briggs' brain and head. Here's the normal skull, and then he's missing on the right side probably a good third or so of his skull. With Sergeant Briggs's case, with the blast injury and the shrapnel, he did lose his right eye. That's unfortunately a fairly common thing that we're seeing as a consequence of these blast injuries, along with the brain injury as well.
I wasn't completely unconscious right after it happened. I remember some of it, and I just knew that I was going to die. And it was very scary, but I didn't, and right after I woke up from the ICU, it was I couldn't move my left side at all. And it was just, I thought, man, why do I want to be like this? I just wanted to die, and why didn't God take me?
Like 40% of the troops in Iraq, Bob's not a regular soldier. He's a reservist in the Iowa National Guard. They usually deal with floods or heavy snow. Bob never expected that he and his family would have to cope with the consequences of war. He has 2 small children who can't understand why he's changed so dramatically. Ashley, your daughter, she's coming up 6. How's she reacted to all of this?
She's been acting out. She's been doing some cutting on some dolls. I mean, it was kind of ironic because she had cut the doll's left arm off and cut the eye out. And she said, he has to look like a monster now. And it was the same injuries as her dad. So that was her way of coping with it, I guess.
Tell me what the smallest line is that you can read.
It's just a little cloudy.
All right, I'm just gonna step down here. What is this line?
LFED.
How about the next one? Can you read that?
Looks like LC, F or FP or PF.
He really, really wants to go back to work. I don't think that's going to be an option with the different medical problems that he has, unless he recovers tremendously. So we just keep telling him, we'll find something for you to do, you know, don't give up.
We're going to practice peeling a potato and then slicing it up.
Even Bob's devastating physical injuries aren't the full story. Up to 80% of returning troops have psychological problems. That's more than twice the rate from the Vietnam War.
He'll wake up screaming like he's in Iraq, yelling at you like you're one of the guys in his unit, you know, take cover, put your stuff on, you know, run and get out of here, get out of here. There was a lot of times when he was waking up, he would tell us to get out of here, get safe.
I'm just worried about somebody coming up trying to hurt me or my family or other people, and I still have the feeling when we got hit over there, you know, I don't want anybody to ever go through that because it's really bad.
But despite their injuries, all the troops we met believe they have to finish the mission in Iraq, whatever the cost.
You miss the guys?
Yes, I do. Very much so. I just wish I could be over there with them and helping them out. Sometimes I feel like I'm not really doing my part, you know, because I'm not there helping them. My unit's over there, and they're all, you know, my brothers. And I worry about all of them, and I can't wait till they get home.
You know, I would go back and do it all over again.
Really?
I mean, I think...
Why?
Why not? I mean, I signed on the line, I signed up to go to war, and I was sent to war, and I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna fight for our country. If that's the price I had to pay for freedom, then, I mean, I'll give my other leg, you know? I mean, we're in America, you can do anything you want, and just hope that other people can have that same chance.
The American president argues that to pull out of Iraq would be to dishonor the sacrifice made by these soldiers. But many military families now say the opposite. They support the troops, but not the war.
You know, I'm a Marine mom, and mothers know when it's time to stop. It's time to stop. It's time to bring them home.
Early October in Columbus, Ohio, a Marines company will soon be coming down this road, returning to their base after 7 months in Iraq. During that time, almost half their number has been killed or wounded, their highest casualty rate since World War II. A small forest of flags honors the dead from all units in Ohio. But it's heavy losses from the local company that's brought the people of Columbus onto the streets, especially the veterans.
Present! Huh!
I just felt it was our obligation as a community to show them how much we appreciated their bravery and their sacrifice.
Detail! And huh!
Many of those forming the honor guard are Vietnam veterans. They know what it's like to fight in an unpopular war. They wanted to make sure this generation was treated better than they were.
It's recognition of everything that the military stands for and the individuals who died and everything else. Give them the respect they deserve.
And that's what we're here for, to support and show them we care.
They're going to need family help. They're going to need psychological help. They're going from wartime to peacetime. It takes a lot of adjustment.
Half right, half left. Hey! Okay, now when I do that, I'm going to be standing right here when I make these calls, okay?
America's president has not been to any homecomings. He's often pictured among his troops, but only with the right backdrop to show him as an effective commander-in-chief.
Thanks for inviting me to dinner.
This was a surprise trip to Iraq 2 years ago. For him, supporting the troops and supporting the war are inseparable. To question the war is unpatriotic because it undermines morale.
Lead elements at Hamilton and Allen Creek should be here within a few minutes.
For many of those lining the streets of Columbus, it's not that simple, especially for the military families. We followed 2 sets of parents preparing for the homecoming, but only one son is coming back alive. August Schrader was 23 when he enlisted to help pay his way through college. His Marines company was made up entirely of part-time reservists.
Augie said that everybody who'd signed up for the college benefits, when they were told that you have to go full-time first, said, okay, well, that's why I joined, so I might as well get this over with. And he said, at that point, they were talking about going to Iraq. And he said, no way, I'm no fool. They're going to Iraq. I'm not going to Iraq.
The conversation was one of resignation more than, oh gosh, let's go get these people. You know, we got to get rid of Saddam. It wasn't anything like that. It was, I may have to go.
At the other end of Ohio lived the Logue family. 19-year-old Mike was also a student who didn't expect to be called up full-time.
Mike joined the Marines more the idea that they told him he could go to college, go to university, not that they would pay anything for it, but he could get into platoon leadership, he could become an officer, and he could be able to fly.
We just accidentally stopped in the Columbus office in the middle of January to find out what his future would be, and that's when they told us he's going to Iraq. And I said, does he know this? And they said, no. And I said, well, when are you going to tell him? Well, when he comes back from training.
Mike and Augie were sent out to Iraq in March, both members of Lima Company. The Marines were among troops sent to one of the most dangerous provinces. Their mission to try and clear out the insurgents. Back home, both families endured a daily tension.
Things were fairly decent until May, and they had the first big operation that killed 5 or 6 Marines. That was Operation Matador. And I really kind of went berserk then. It was like, oh my gosh, you know, my son is really in danger.
And so you would go to bed at night saying a prayer that get him through today. And when we would get up in the morning, it was immediately to the computer to look at the internet.
And then you get on the television, you try to find news, which you can't find. There's just very little news, you know, 30-second little clips here and there. And you know, there's a big war going on, and our young men and women are being killed. So it's the searching, and the searching for news. And in that searching for news, you want to be comforted, like, oh, okay, my son is okay.
In early August, 6 Marines from the 325th Regiment were ambushed and killed in Haditha. After an agonizing wait, the families discovered Mike and Augie were safe. But 2 days later, the Marines went back into Haditha to find those who'd killed their colleagues. Their convoy hit a roadside bomb and 14 Marines died. They were mostly from Lima Company, Mike and Augie's unit.
We knew it was the 325. We knew it was his unit, but we didn't know who it was in that, you know, and we didn't know whether our son was involved, and we were reading graphic details about the injuries and the, right, you know, and the saving of the people, and it was.
All of a sudden, at about 10:45, my sister, who lives next door, came running in the back door, screaming, "Paul, Paul, get down here!" And she had tears in her voice. And we went to the back door, and there were 2 Marines. And, are you the parents of Lance Corporal Edward August Schrader? Yes. Maybe we come in. And we sat where you are, and they sat here. And Lieutenant Colonel Rush had to compose himself. It took him a good minute to compose himself to tell us that Augie was killed. I mean, to me, in that instant, we knew. And I felt so bad for him because the day before, he had to do that 6 times.
Every mother, every parent that I've talked to, the mothers, you know, who've lost children have said the same thing, that they didn't relax until they got the word that their child had been killed.
It was like a weight off your shoulder.
Because there's nothing more they can do to them.
The last leg of Lima Company's journey home was a 15-mile drive from the local airport with a massive escort.
so excited to see our sons come home, but I can't imagine what it's like for these parents whose sons aren't coming home. I just can't imagine that. I don't think I can bury my son, not for something like this.
Give your Uncle Ben a big hug. Give your Uncle Ben a big hug. Come here. My gear weighs more than usual, boy.
Finally, the Loebs were reunited.
You know, the stress is leaving you as you start to leave Iraq and you get out Kuwait and Germany and start coming into the States, but still you're like, just want to get home, just want to get home, you know. And that plane touches down, it's like, all right, I feel pretty safe and confident now that I'll see my family. It's overwhelming, it was very touching. So many people were out there showing their support, and it was amazing. I saw my mom right away come running at me, so I saw her full of tears and crying.
Really?
Yeah.
I felt like I was a crazy woman, like, but what is this crazy woman doing, you know? I couldn't stop crying and I couldn't let him go.
He's more than our hero. He's our Michael Loeb. Right. On behalf of, you know, not only is Mom and Dad and Krista and John happy to have you home, but so is the rest of your immediate family and friends, as you can tell by today, right? Yes. So on behalf of your aunts and your uncles and their ex-husbands and their ex-wives, yeah, in some instances, we've got something for you.
You've served with honor. It takes courage to serve, to protect, to keep our community strong. Your service and protecting others makes you a remarkable person, someone truly worthy of our deepest gratitude.
Thank you all so much for being here and for being a support for all of us while he's been gone. It's been a ride, as you know, as I've expressed in my emails, and thank you for allowing me to express my pain. But he's home now.
Yeah.
Hoorah.
Don't want to take anything away from those guys and their families. But it's painful. You know, I had been thinking in July that when he came home, we'd have a big party here. And I started to collect firewood because we have a big garden that would be plowed under. We'd roast a lamb, have all kinds of people, invite the immediate world, and have a big celebration. I've got the firewood, I've got the garden, that's about it. And that party would have been today. As we're talking, it would have been today.
Augie lived in Ohio but grew up in New Jersey. His body was blown apart, so they buried him in both the places he called home. His parents have nothing but praise for the Marines. They were Augie's second family. It's the war they oppose.
You can go from deep, deep grief and sadness to a deep, deep anger very quickly. If you have skin in this game and they have died, parents or spouses are very unwilling to admit that this death was for anything but a noble cause, anything but protecting our freedom. I knew that this was not a noble cause. I will state flatly that my son's death and all these other deaths have been wasted, that his life was wasted by this death. It should not have been. It didn't need to be, for no good cause.
Among the mementos they're left with, the carefully folded flag that covered Augie's coffin, and a photo of his 11-man squad. 10 of them are now dead.
Look at that handsome young man. Look at all of these handsome young men. They're all full of life. They all had different hopes and dreams. And all of those hopes and dreams, all of that love, it's not there anymore. And you have to ask yourself, why? And that's a difficult thing to do.
More than 2,000 coffins have now come home from Iraq. But unlike many previous presidents, George Bush wasn't there to honour their return. He even tried to ban these photographs.
I think they've pulled off really a big lie by pretending to be very, very supportive of the military. They've been able to get away with not supporting the military in the most important way, showing respect for those who've made the ultimate sacrifice.
American Air Force Base at Ramstein in Germany. 3 times a week, a massive C-17 loads up with troops who've been injured in Iraq. After treatment in the military hospital here, they're stable enough to go home. As usual, most of the wounded have multiple injuries from bomb blasts. This is a side of the war the American public rarely sees, because the government has gone to great lengths to play down this human cost. But the sheer scale of casualties is now colouring public opinion and tipping it against the war. The noise makes normal conversation almost impossible. We'd met Vincent Worrell earlier in the week. His injuries from a roadside bomb were healing up well.
Pretty happy to be headed home. Looking forward to seeing my wife and daughter. It's been nice to be back on American soil again.
Sergeant Howard was burnt by the flash flame from a suicide bomber. He's lost most of his hearing.
Burnt by the fire from the suicide bomber.
We take off with 17 injured soldiers, but according to Pentagon figures, there are only 9. They only include those wounded in battle. So Antonio Scalzo doesn't count. He was badly burnt by faulty electrical kit.
My fingers were completely black, and the skin across the back of my hand was gone. Across my knuckles, the skin was curled back and charred, or as I call roasted.
Simon Wess is serving in Afghanistan. He collapsed with severe pneumonia. His wife is flying home with him. He won't show up in the figures for the Afghan war. The American public are told that almost 16,000 troops have been wounded in Iraq. But if the Pentagon counted everyone who's evacuated for medical reasons as the British do, that would double to over 30,000. It's November the 11th, Veterans Day. Back home, the news will be full of parades and speeches, not images like this. While we're in the air, President Bush is at a military base defending his invasion of Iraq.
While it's perfectly legitimate to criticize my decision or the conduct of the war, it is deeply irresponsible to rewrite the history of how that war began. And our troops deserve to know that whatever our differences in Washington, our will is strong, our nation is united, and we will settle for nothing less than victory.
But Americans are more divided over Iraq than ever. 2/3 of them now say you don't support the troops by continuing a war with no victory in sight. And that's because pictures like this stir up memories of another long drawn-out conflict. This memorial in Washington honors almost 60,000 troops killed in Vietnam during 16 years of war. Constant TV images of the dead and wounded sickened Americans and put pressure on their government to pull out. Vietnam led to the phrase the Dover test. How many coffins could be seen returning to Dover Air Force Base before Americans said enough is enough? Ronald Reagan was one of the few recent presidents to brave the Dover test and risk damaging the image of a competent commander-in-chief. When the Americans invaded Afghanistan 4 years ago, the cameras were there to meet the homecoming dead, but President Bush wasn't. And when coffins began arriving from Iraq, he imposed a total news blackout. Even though these pictures were taken by military photographers, the government banned their release.
I think they've pulled off really a big lie by pretending to be very, very supportive of the military. They've been able to get away with not supporting the military in the most important way, showing respect for those who've made the ultimate sacrifice.
After 20 years reporting at CNN, Ralph Begleiter knows what war looks like. For months, he badgered the Pentagon to release the pictures. Finally, he sued and won.
The goal was not to go to file a lawsuit. The goal was to make the American people aware of the cost of war. And now those images are out there. There is nothing unseemly about photographs like this. There is nothing ghoulish or macabre about these photographs. These are the most respectful way you could say goodbye to a fallen comrade.
What was it then that the government was so fearful of? You know, why did they not want these images out there?
Well, any government wants to maintain public support once it's decided to go to war. I mean, going to war is the most important foreign policy action any country can take. And in this country, you can't do it without support of the American people. The military knows that. Perhaps the military knows it better than even politicians know it. They need financial support, they need moral support, they need political support. And maintaining public opinion in support of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan were highly important for this administration and would be for any administration. So anything that seemed to be chipping away at that support was opposed.
After a 10-hour flight, we land at Andrews Air Force Base. Most of the wounded are going to the main Army hospital here in Washington. George Bush has taken the public's emotional support for the troops and claimed it as political support for his Iraq policy. But now people are objecting to that.
It's gonna shine upon the wounded. I'm gonna let it shine. It's gonna
Outside the Army hospital, there's a regular Friday night ritual. It began as a protest by an anti-war group.
I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
We started out here because they were sneaking the wounded in the middle of the night. They didn't want anybody to remember that there were people who were wounded people. Real men and women who had served their country, wounded, being brought in, hidden in the middle of the night.
We wanted to educate people who are driving by to the issues that these soldiers are facing. They're looking at long-term disabilities.
Another group objected to the protest, so they set up across the road.
These are a bunch of communists and Marxists. They hate everything about this country. They hate our soldiers. They call our soldiers a bunch of killers, and they carry signs that are meant only to demean and demoralize these guys.
They want to make our soldiers feel bad about being soldiers and about fighting for the United States of America.
This isn't just a row between fringe groups, it's ricocheting through every level of American political life.
My name is Paul Hackett. I started this day off in a Union Hall, a
by-election
UAW hall
in Ohio last
but
summer. This is
our
always a
military,
key state. It was
our
victory
military
here that gave
has to be
President
used
Bush his second
effectively
term.
and wisely.
Standing for Congress as a Democrat, Paul Hackett lost, but he cut a huge Republican majority down to a sliver. He spent 7 months in Iraq as a Marine reservist. So when he said you can support the troops but oppose the war, the voters respected that.
If they said to you, should we be in Iraq, what would you say? Would you say yes,
I get asked
no?
that question all the time, and I say, number one, no, the war's over, bring them home. Number two, it was a misuse of the military. We're using the military to try to rebuild a nation that is progressively in worse shape, at least from an infrastructural point of view, than it was when we got there two and a half years ago. This administration has used the military to fight a war on terrorism with the simplistic thought that the war on terrorism is a matter of killing enough people. And if you can get all the bad guys together, we can just kill them all. I'm fond of saying, I got no problem with killing bad guys, okay? Bring your hate and discontent on my shores. I got no problem going over to Afghanistan and killing the bad guys who crashed into the Twin Towers. Not a problem. But here's the problem. Terrorism is a war of ideas. It's that simple. You can't kill an idea by killing people.
Paul Hackett will stand for office again next year, and the growing opposition to the war might just propel him to Washington. The rumblings of discontent have already reached Capitol Hill. Next year, there are midterm elections. Republicans could lose seats unless they come up with some answers on Iraq.
Many of us have gone to funerals. We visited those who have been wounded. We visited parents who now are tortured because of their loss. And they want to know that their son or daughter did not die because some foolish or incompetent politician had some axe to grind. And they may not have demanded this before, but they're demanding it now.
Wayne Gilchrist signed a motion calling on the president to set a timetable for withdrawal. Last week, the Republican majority voted that down, even though in private they are worried.
When we get together in the halls of Congress, behind closed doors, there are many members of Congress, many Republicans, who are unsettled about the war in Iraq, because there doesn't seem to be any real clear strategy to end the conflict for the United States. And their constituents are becoming more unsettled about the conflict. That will be reflected in the upcoming election.
On both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, there was a resounding silence of dissent or even critical thought on the use of the military in Iraq. I think it was pathetic. You know, they all jumped on board, and now they scratch their chin and say, well, you know, I've had time to reflect, and gee, maybe it was a bad idea. It's like, hey, genius, it didn't take 2,000 lives and $200 billion for the rest of us to figure this out.
George Bush's approval ratings have shrunk to an all-time low. Only about a third of Americans now think that generally he's doing a good job. And his handling of Iraq is one of the most damaging factors.
Whenever we leave, the place is going to spin out of control. And if we don't leave in that 20 years, the cost will be more than Americans are willing to pay, both in money and in blood. And so, you know, the politicians have got to come to terms with that, and they got to figure out how to do it.
3 weeks ago, the death toll hit 2,000. At last, it was front-page news.
I would ask the Senate now proceed to a moment of silence in honor of our fallen soldiers.
To a moment of silence in honor of our fallen soldiers.
President Bush, at a meeting of military wives, was unrepentant.
A time of war is a time for sacrifice, and the greatest burden falls on our military families. We've lost some of our nation's finest men and women in the war on terror. Each of these men and women left grieving families and left loved ones back home. Each of these patriots left a legacy that allowed generations of their fellow Americans to enjoy the blessings of liberty. We will never back down, never give in, and never accept anything less than complete victory.
But last week, Bill Clinton weighed in, the highest level criticism so far. He called the invasion a big mistake. Bush had underestimated the task and not sent enough troops to prevent the terrorists pouring in. And one of the most respected voices in Congress also attacked Bush's policy for the first time. Democrat John Murta has impeccable credentials. He's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran.
I like guys that never been there to criticize us that been there. I like that. The military's done everything that has been asked of them. The U.S. cannot accomplish anything further in Iraq militarily. It's time to bring the troops home.
When those who've experienced war and sacrifice raise their voices, then the true cost of America's invasion of Iraq is finally hitting home.
Our life is so comfortable. And we're so anesthetized, you know, we're so taken up in the media by who's divorcing who and who's wearing what to what awards. It's like, I don't give a crap anymore, you know? It's changed our lives. Yeah. I will never not pay attention to war and to who's dying.
What we have been asking people to do since our son died is to say, I am opposed to this war. Stand on the rooftops and shout it and tell every member of Congress that we're not going to accept this anymore.